Hello, I want to welcome everyone to Deep Dive. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict, and I'm excited to have all of you with us today. And I'm very excited to have as our guest today, Air Commodore John Wariner from the Royal Air Force. John, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Kevin. It's an absolute pleasure. Looking forward to it.
You know, this is a very special episode here because I believe you're the first military leader that I've been able to have on the program here. So we're going to have a fascinating discussion. And before we get any further here, so an Air Commodore, for those that might not be familiar with how that kind of ranks in the UK compared to the US, talk to us about that.
I find it great when in the Royal Air Force we wear what some might see as a barcode, their stripes. And every other Air Force or Army or Navy will look at us with some sort of disdain. What on earth is that rank you're wearing? And when I sort of describe to them, say, I'm an Air Commodore, yeah, what's that, buddy? And I said, well, that's like a Brigadier General. And I had the occasional airman faint. It's great, but it's just an rank equivalent. That's all it is.
Well, that's great. So the equivalent of a Brigadier General here in the U.S., and my understanding is you've done multiple tours. You have 36 years in the service as an ally of the U.S. as well. So I want to thank you so much for your service to your country and as an ally of our country too. You've taken multiple tours overseas, Iraq and Afghanistan. So again, thanks for all your service.
No, thank you very much indeed. I've had a whale of a time for 36 years, 18 different postings. All over all those years. I think that's a good dozen house moves. Thousands, loads of countries, had a whale of a time.
So John, 36 years out there, it's my understanding that you're responsible for over 3,000 people in your organization, responsible for IT at the Royal Air Force. Talk to us about your, how you ended up there and what your role includes right now.
It's been a great journey. There's been a bit of luck. There's been a lot of hard work and a lot of fun. And if I go back to my first tour where someone said, hey, we need an IBM PC. And no, there weren't other alternatives available. And it's why on earth do we want an IBM PC in our operation? That's how it starts. Then someone says, hey, can we network these? And then I sort of went, well, why don't we create an intranet? And we start growing it. It grows from 1 to 2 to hundreds of thousands to 10,000. But the best privilege for any military commander can have is to be in command of people. And it's such a special moment. So in the first time I'm put in command, it's 20, 30 people. And in the command I've just left, being the force commander for what we call the A6 force. So there's the Air Force CIS comms. There was 1,500 people in command. But what was a real privilege were the profession of the IT people in the Royal Air Force is 3,000 people. And so you're trying to be the head of profession and trying to look after the interests of 3,000 people who want to have a great career and seize all the opportunities. So it's that learning as you're going. You're trying not to let anyone down and trying to make the best decisions for the most people possible and be as future-looking as you possibly can. And that's,
yeah. And so, John, I mean, in a government position there, I'm sure there's, unique challenges there compared to the commercial industry part of it. How would you explain the differences between IT in a military organization, IT in a big company?
I've always liked the luxury of when you're in your mainland, you can get connectivity really easily. And next minute you land in the middle of a desert somewhere and you've got a tent. And now you're used to 50 megabytes or whatever it is of bandwidth you've got at home. And now you've got, the mobile phone doesn't work because there's no mobile phone mast. And somehow you've got to get the same connectivity that you're used to back in your mainland country, and you've got to make it work in a really austere environment somewhere. You've got to connect it together so you can receive orders. So that challenge is fascinating. It's all about the network.
Oh, yeah. I was looking here through your bio, and so you have responsibilities for provisioning in the middle of a desert, policy, projecting. I imagine that's like force projection or just operational projection, and the protection of all of that in the data.
Yeah, the policy, I think, is the easy thing, really. You're trying to do it as economically as you can, because it is taxpayers' money. At the end of the day, there's no way you want to be wasteful in what you're buying. It's got to be economic. So that's all about sort of policy. And provision is buying it, is acquiring it. You can't afford to have multiple different types of IT. You need to have a really coherent mix. And projecting it forward, putting it into harm's reach, or the people with it in harm's reach, to enable an operation which you could be taking off in a country, operating, say, collecting evidence, intelligence in another country, and then landing back again. You've got to make that work across all of that. And when you're an armed force, there's always someone that doesn't like what you're doing. There's always someone envious in some way that wishes to do you harm, that could try to impact what you're doing. So you've got to protect it. And I was thinking of it in the car as I was driving back this afternoon, and I thought, if you think of your humble dishwasher in the kitchen, you can protect that from a cyber attack, because you can turn it off, and you can get your hands wet, and you can do your washing in the sink, can't you?
Yes.
When it comes to an aeroplane, you can't really turn it off, because you really need to get somewhere. So turning it off, not an option. You've got to be able to protect it, and you've got to work in a congested and contested battle space. And that's the real challenge of IT from home and away.
Oh, yeah, and there's that whole new dimension of warfare nowadays where it's not just a physical harm that you're concerned about, is, the virtual attacks on your networks and your data and your communication. I imagine that's really evolved over the course of your careers too, as well.
Massively so. The word cyber has only really been invented about 10 years ago as an expression. If I go back to nearly 20 years ago, and I was running an organization that was doing information security, and we had got networks all over the Royal Air Force. And as we were probing through the networks, we found one base hacking another base. And I thought, what do we do with this? The RAF is hacking the RAF. This can't be right. This is 20 years ago. And so my team, I had a mixture of policemen, technicians, and all sorts. And I sent a two-man team, a technician and a policeman, to one of the RAF bases. The policeman to feel the collar of the guy that we knew that was hacking the other base, and the technician to offer him a job. And I thought, if I can get those good guys, because they're all on my side, those good guys and girls, and bringing them into the team, the brilliance of what you can do there is you can start to do cyber protection. And that was the very start of the first computer network defense team, the first time we did cyber protection 20 years ago. It's grown enormously from that. But and that was a really simple way of looking at it. Now it's industrialized on a global scale.
Oh, yeah.
And particularly cyber criminals want to have a go. And you've got to be able to protect against all sorts of threats.
Well, man, I can hear a book in your future there, John. One of the parts of, studying military, and a lot of the books you see behind me are military strategies and digital transformation and digital warfare and centric operations and all that. A lot of that, what's fascinating to me is that in the military, you seem to have two things. You have like the latest space age kind of technology, and then you have some really kind of 10-year-old, 15, 20-year-old technology, all in the same force. And there's kind of a big gap between frontline space age and back end. So do you experience that kind of thing? And if you do, how do you keep all that operating?
Oh, massively so. I think of it in terms of classic cars, and how many of our grandparents have bought a classic car, and they've been operating that classic car and maintained it themselves for their entire lives. And they've gone out and bought a Tesla, and they're operating that at the same site. I mean, it's no one does that, do they? But that's what we do. And if you think of the operation today in Iraq and Syria, and the Royal Air Force is flying today the Tornado GR4 aircraft. That was designed in the 60s and 70s, delivered in the late 70s. We're flying it today. It goes out of service in March of this year, and we transfer the weapons across into the Typhoon, the Eurofighter Typhoon, and to the F-35 as well. So we're continually evolving our aircraft. It's like taking an old aircraft and I pimp my ride. And it's not quite as trivial as that, because it's super complex, and you've got to integrate it into an aircraft platform in a safe way and a coherent way that's maintainable. But you've got to bring the people with you, and you've absolutely got to keep upskilling your people every step of the way so they're ready for the next challenge.
Yeah, John, we have here in Boise, Idaho, where I'm located, we have squadrons of A-10 Warthogs. And they, those started in the 60s as well as a platform. They've been evolving those, and they've tried to retire them so many different times. But the fact is they're still so capable, they just keep pimping their rides again and upgrading them.
You reminded me of a brilliant story. There's a little tower in Lincolnshire in the United Kingdom. It's part of the chain home radars that was created in the Second World War. And it's 360 foot tall. And you climb up these towers to test your ability to climb. And I remember it was a long time ago now, and we were on the very small platform at the very top. It was one of those days, 360 foot in the air, and you heard this noise. And what's flying beneath you, either side, were two A-10s flying past you. Thinking, that's really cool. Can I get that now, please?
Man, I have to cheer every time I see those guys circling the airport now. They're even though they have a reputation for being ugly, they're just beautiful. So talk to us about what digital transformation looks like in the Royal Air Force.
I see digital transformation as one of the greatest opportunities so far of this decade, as a minimum. It's absolutely phenomenal. I'll give you one tiny example of a digital transformation. And we all claim through our companies some sort of financial things for whatever they are. And at some point you'll fill in a form. And you'll need to prove a thing, so you'll need a couple of pieces of paper to prove you live where you are, or your car's insured, you got tax or whatever. And you bring those pieces of paper together, and one of the HR clerks will process that, and eventually you'll be given your that small amount of money for that allowance.
Yes.
And when I looked at one example where my team were exasperated, and they said it takes 15 minutes to do that. Now, 15 minutes is nothing. It's trivial, isn't it? It's trivial. But that 15 minutes of paperwork, you could do that in 15 seconds. But if you do that, and there's 31,750 people in the Royal Air Force, regular serving Royal Air Force, 15 minutes times 32,000 people, that's quite a long time, isn't it? And if you do that, that's for one trivial process. So if you now say we've got 1,000 processes over 32,000 people, that's 32 million moments that you could digitize.
Absolutely.
That's a huge amount of time and effort you could take out of the organization, and you can reinvest those people into other things that you want to do. You could save if you want to. You can reinvest and re-employ them into doing other great things. And so I see the massive opportunity. When we looked at digital transformation across the Royal Air Force, and we went, okay, let's put a number, let's put a business case behind this. It's actually worth. Our first punt, using some of our Big Four consultants, came up with £500 million. We thought, that's the sort of value you're looking at in digital transformation. How do we get at that? So we're starting on a huge journey with transformation now.
Oh, that's incredible. So when you're involved in that, what are some of the biggest challenges that an organization as big as the Royal Air Force faces from, change management, even with that kind of change?
I think the first challenge that I would look at is, I love the expression ideation, the creativity, the idea in the first place. So that wonderful individual that when she told me about the 15 minutes to process, if I'd just dismissed that very junior member of staff and was dismissive of her trivial 15-minute moment, I would have dismissed a massive transformational opportunity. Having the idea in the first place, that's the hardest part. But once you start the ball rolling, you start momentum and growing the ideas around transformation, then it becomes really overwhelming. And I took to our senior leadership team and said, okay, the opportunity here around digital is enormous. And then there's the unconscious bias. So the IT guy was talking to the board about digital transformation, and they thought I could fix it. And I said, well, I can bring technology to bear, but I now need you to be a change champion from the main board. So I need the top level buy-in from the main board to say, that's where we need to go. You need me with the technology, and then we've got to bring in the workforce. And if you haven't got the whole workforce on board, creating the ideas, supporting the changes, taking a process, tearing it to pieces, and turning an analog process into a digital process that's much slicker, much faster, you need all three coming together coherently at the right time. There's some huge programs. I think the opportunity is enormous.
Great leadership advice there now. And as you pointed out in that 15-minute savings, there's a lot of things that can be done that have a significant amount of benefit that aren't necessarily revolutionary. You had shared with me a little bit about Microsoft Office and some of your new implementations.
We've ripped out the IT across the UK defence, and that's about 200,000 users. And we've modernized that IT in a new style of IT and put Office 365 across the board. And it's, you look at that from when we were used to PowerPoint, Excel, and Microsoft Word and Outlook. The operations are run on PowerPoint and Outlook. That's 4 aspects of Office 365.
Yes.
There are more, and this really shouldn't be an advert for Office 365, but we bought into it, so that's where we are. And there's so much more that you can do. And it's how do we seize some of those other opportunities, and how do I create something in Flow and dovetail that with SharePoint and use that with maybe some analytics, and maybe buying in some robotic process automation and joining that all together on that journey. You've got an incredible sort of cutting-edge technology of Office 365. Now you've got the platform, I need the ideas. Then we can start to revolutionize with 100 small steps. And everyone doing 100 small steps moves us a huge distance further forward.
Oh, yeah. It's standardization, is to be able to everyone communicate and share the same platforms and to move data efficiently and have access to it and be able to find it when it's done. Just those kinds of things, right? They're not a new aircraft, but they really can change the way data flows and around how orders flow and everything.
I think the challenge there as well is how do we educate our people? How do we, and it sounds pejorative, but I don't mean it in that way. And I was talking to some really bright people recently, and I said, so how much time do you take out to go to the doctor? And during the year, an hour, 2 hours? How much time do you take out to go to see the dentist? An hour, 2 hours? How much time do you take out to sharpen your own axe on your IT skills? And they looked at me and went, well, I wouldn't, sir. Why would I do that? So how do you think you can go through a career of 20 years and spend no time at all on sharpening your skills with your tools as any employee, wherever you are in the company, or the Air Force, or the Army? And you've got to invest in our time into our people so that they can start to use the tools in a far more efficient, effective way. I'm really excited about our journey that we've launched on.
So I imagine with all these changes and just looking out there and what you read, data, vast and massive quantities of data are just flooding in that have never been there before. That must also impact the RAF there. So talk to me about the importance of data strategies in the RAF.
Yeah, data, in my mind, I see is hugely important, hugely important. I think the weakest data strategy you can have is to be regulation compliant. So you are called with whatever rules, GDPR, if you abide by those rules, that is the weakest strategy you can have. It's okay, you're compliant, but it's the weakest. The clever guys and girls will have 3 things to their strategy. And they'll think of it first and foremost in their data strategy about the individual. and they'll be thinking about the individual's data, because the individual is absolutely the most valuable part of the organization, and it's absolutely the weakest link as well. So if you don't get your individual data right, that could be your weakest link, where you're clicking the hyperlink and hemorrhaging your data out of the company. So there's your starter for 10, your individual data. And then it's got to be the enterprise, the company you're working with. How are you going to use your data for your own company? And the third strategy would be your customer strategy around data. So how are you going to make value for your customer? One thing we do with the jet engines in our aircraft are provided by Rolls-Royce. There are many jet engines across the world. And with the telemetry that comes off those jet engines is a huge amount of data. But if you do some big data analytics on that data, you can start to work out and predict when those engines need specific types of maintenance. And you can drive a huge amount of cost of unnecessary work out of the business. So if you can do that individual, the enterprise, and the customer part of the data strategy, you'll end up in a brilliant place. Now, I want to keep going. Because hoovering up data. Everyone does it in terms of the military, in terms of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. You need to hoover up data. If you really wanted to, you could try to store it. And I don't know where the biggest storage facility is in the world for data, but you're going to run out, because there isn't an infinite amount. And you need to find a way of managing that near infinite amount of data. But a mistake would be I'm looking for one thing, so that's the data I need to keep, is that one thing. The reality is you also need to not look in the eyes, look around the eyes. And so when you're looking for a particular thing, let's get some analytics around the data around it, and it will start to give you other insights into what that data might bring out for you. And that could be target reconnaissance. Yeah. It could be about business finance spend. Wherever that data is, you need to save enough data, do enough analytics on that data, and you can find a huge amount of value in that data that you can reinvest back into the enterprise.
Wow. So with the increasing value and quantity of data out there, it's all the more important to protect that data. And one of the areas that I see that you're responsible for is cyber resilience. Talk to us about that.
Cyber is, you can think of cyber as a two-sided coin. There's offensive cyber. Some might call it hacking. It's very classified. It's the going after somebody else in some way. And that could be really exciting to a warfighter. You might be able to use offensive cyber in some way. But in my mind, that's only 5% of the business. 95% is the flip side of the coin. How do you do that cyber protection? And as I said about the dishwasher, you can't turn it off. And if you're committed to an operation and you've got people in harm's way, you can't turn the comms off, because you might be committing them to their untimely death. So you need to be able to protect the data, the information of networks in some way. So it's finding sufficient resilience in the round so that you can protect that data and that information. I think the first thing would be, you cannot protect what you don't understand. So if you think you've got a bewildering number of networks with tens of thousands of clients all over them, and you have no idea where they are and what they are, you have got a problem. But if you do understand all of your hardware, do you understand all of the software across all of your networks? What software should be there? What software is there that shouldn't be there? Right. Is that software operating in the way you expect it to operate? And if I drew some really good utility from the Center for Internet Security's 20 CIS critical security controls. I can't even say it. 20 security critical controls. And I found those controls really a simple description. At the top end, identify our hardware. Number 20, do penetration testing. There's 18 in the middle of that, which if you're trying to get at those and have a really good stab at all 20 of the critical controls, you'll move your organization from cyber vulnerable to cyber resilient. Not cyber protected, but resilient. You're able to survive to operate, whether it's in a business sense or a military sense. So you've got to do the lot.
Oh, yeah, because when you talk about these network forces, that gives an advantage, but it also is a disadvantage as well because it means somebody in their garage has the opportunity to try to penetrate one of the world's strongest military organizations as well because they can do it through the internet. So I can see how it gives us both the advantages and the strength, but it also creates vulnerabilities there too. If we can, let's talk a little bit about network-enabled forces. And, you know, in the military in the U.S., they call it what, metric-centric operations or network-centric warfare. I think you guys have another term you like. Was it network-centric enablement?
We liked network-enabled capability. And we were envious. I say envious, a little bit cheeky, really. But we saw the US lead on network-centric warfare, and we didn't like the word warfare. But we had network-enabled capability, and this was around 2003 when we had that initiative, and we didn't invest as much as we wanted to invest in the network, and the reality is, it's that last word. Whether you call it warfare, capability, or operations, that's the word that's the most important. That's what you're trying to do. That's the objective. The objective in our mind was not the network. It was always about the outcome.
Yeah.
So we've now moved from, we created and put a lot of money into the network, but we're now moving far more into what do we do with it. And my own personal opinion, I think we might end up, with the amount of data we've got, in something that's a bit more like data-driven operations. Mm. Every operation is political. You only have to read a bit of Clausewitz to understand what military really is. But is it data-driven? So the insights that you get from your data could drive your business. But another word we're using more is about combat cloud. And everything out there is a node on the network. And whether you're a ship, you're a tank, you're an aeroplane, you're a satellite, you're part of the network. And it's how do you bring all of those parts together to make a coherent network? And if you think of a traditional procurement, any major procurement, is we'll spend 10 years creating the requirement from hell. And we will atomize it, and we will cost it, and it'll be trillions of pounds and dollars and euros. And it's unaffordable. And then we'll try and scale it back. What the Royal Air Force is doing now is something completely different. We're doing some experimentation. We're trying to get a bunch of really bright companies. Some of them are big, some of them are small. Get them in a room and say, this is what we've got. What could we do with that? If we spent a small amount of money, could we make huge gains in a combat cloud by doing a bit of experimentation and coming up with something really, really clever rather than going back and doing the old school? Some might call it agile, but I think it's a really exciting step forward.
That's really fascinating. A good friend of mine, Frank Diana, who's a futurist, has a concept that he likes to talk about as combinatorial innovation, where it's taking existing technologies and putting them in different combinations to see to add value and to actually innovate. And it doesn't always have to be brand new technology. It's new combinations of existing technology.
Absolutely right. I think it's important also to be thinking about secure by design. So you can get really excited about experimentation, but if you're not trying to make it secure at the outset, then what you could be through those combinations is introducing vulnerabilities you hadn't thought about. But maybe your adversary, your competitor, has already thought about them. So you've got to be very careful that you're putting resilience and security in the forefront of your mind at all the exciting opportunities as well. You need to bring that security element in as well. And then you'll end up moving forward in a safe, that's critical for everyone in the aviation industry, a safe and a secure manner.
So, John, in the commercial sector, one of the biggest challenges traditional companies have is to be able to actually change directions and adapt to the rapid changing markets they're in, or changing customer behaviors, or any of that's changing so rapidly today. And they have legacy systems on the back end, and they have institutional habits and behaviors that make it hard to adjust. But it seems to me that in your background of being able to go out into the middle of the desert and set up a complete operation, tear it down when necessary, move it, all of that might give you some incredible skills to be able to jump out there in a commercial sector in a rapidly changing market and take some of those, some of those experiences you've learned from and apply them in that space. What do you think?
I think the airmen and airwomen that I've been privileged to work with are hugely valuable in the industry. You can take someone that's had a small amount of training, and you don't spend years training them, a small amount of training, you throw them into an operational construct, and they're trained for one thing. But the war is a horrible thing, and things change. And therefore, it's we were doing that, we now need to do this. Can anybody do a bit of that? And you get a bright couple of boys and girls together to think about, actually, we can crack this. And their agility at solving problems is incredible. And all you need to do is give them access to resources where they don't quite understand. Have some access to that training resource there. And, that's how I could do it. I remember there was an example where it was 2010, middle of Afghanistan, and the network had gone down. How do we fix the network? It's all a little bit emotional. It's all getting a little bit difficult. And there was a few bright boys and girls. One of them had accessed the library of stuff that was back in the War College back in the UK. And he picked up, and I went, that's the way to do that. And that was all they needed to unlock and start solving the problem. There was a number of things that solved the problem.
Yes.
If you give access to your people, whether it's a warfighting situation, or you've just got a different bid that's come in, or your customer you're supporting, they've had a catastrophe. You need to solve a problem you had not foreseen. The agility of those people is superb at adapting to that change. I think it's quite exciting. Problem for me is, how do I then retain them in the organization and don't lose them?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So you're getting ready to finish up 36 years in the Royal Air Force. What's the rest of your career look like, John? As you can tell, I'm an energetic guy, and I'm really excited. I'm going to do 4 things. First of all, by next weekend, this time next week, I'm going to be skiing in Austria. A few weeks later, I'm going to be diving, Slovak. I'm going to be scuba diving in Lanzarote. In between all of that, I'll be running, I'll be riding, and I'll just be going having a whale of a time for a few weeks. But beyond that, actually, the serious side of it is you have to pay the mortgage, don't you? So I wanted to do 3 things in life. I wanted to be a great leader. I had some fantastic opportunities, and I hope some of the people I've worked with might actually call me a leader. I want to be a great friend. And I always like having a beer, and I like being a great friend. And I wanted to be a great businessman. Well, I am not that yet. So I wish to go and prove that I can be a great businessman. So that's what I want to do. And if I get an opportunity in that journey, I want to do some public speaking. But by the most important thing in all of that is life is too short. You've got to smile and you've got to have fun. With that, John, I can't add anything more to that. That's brilliant. I'm excited to watch how your new career evolves and adapts. And thanks again for all your service to all of us.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good luck.
Thanks, John. And I want to thank everyone out there for joining us today.